It was just another Monday morning in downtown Chicago, until two little girls walked into a billionaire's office, wearing suits, carrying no connections, just pure genius in their hands. The city of Chicago lay under a heavy gray sky, its towering skyscrapers blurred by misty drizzle. Cold raindrops tapped rhythmically against the glass windows of Silvertech Labs, a company known for making machines smarter than most humans. On the 47th floor, inside a sleek modern office that smelled faintly of espresso and steel, the CEO, Richard Grant, leaned back in his chair, lost in thought. He was only 30 but already a legend in the tech world. With sharp blue eyes, dark stubble, and a mind faster than any algorithm, Richard had gone from coding in his bedroom at 16 to leading a billion-dollar firm that built artificial intelligence for hospitals, schools, and even NASA. He had money, power, and the attention of the media, but none of it impressed him anymore. That morning he was focused on one thing: the Young Genius Internship. It was his idea, an open call to find brilliant young minds under 21 who could bring fresh innovation to his company. Thousands had applied. Most were PhD students, Ivy League prodigies, or science fair champions. His assistants had narrowed the list down to a dozen. Interviews would begin shortly. Richard glanced at the names on the schedule. Then he sipped his black coffee, bitter and hot, just the way he liked it. He wasn't expecting to be surprised. He wasn't expecting to feel anything, really. Then the intercom buzzed. Richard? His assistant, Mia, said slowly. Your next applicant's just arrived, and well, you really need to see this for yourself. Richard frowned. Mia was never the nervous type. He stood up and walked toward the glass doors of the conference room, expecting maybe a flash mob, or some overconfident teenager in a lab coat. But when the doors opened, he froze. Two little girls, no more than 9 or 10 years old, stood there in the lobby. One wore a navy blue suit with a white collared shirt, her blonde curls tied neatly behind her head. The other had straight chestnut hair and wore a gray blazer that was slightly too big for her small shoulders. Both held leather folders tightly in their hands, thicker than most grown-up résumés he'd seen. The room fell into stunned silence. His staff, the security guard, even the janitor mopping the marble floor paused to stare. Richard blinked. Once, twice. He didn't say a word. The taller girl stepped forward with an air of unshakable confidence. "Good morning," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "We're here to apply for the internship." Richard raised an eyebrow. A chuckle slipped from a junior analyst's mouth before being silenced by a sharp glance from Mia. The little girl didn't flinch. "My name is Harper James, and this is Lily Morgan. We've prepared our applications. Would you like to review them?" Harper held out her folder as if she were offering a peace treaty between nations. Richard took it slowly, still unsure whether this was a prank, a social experiment, or some weird documentary shoot. "Is this a joke?" he asked cautiously, scanning the room for a hidden camera crew. Lily shook her head and spoke up for the first time, her voice softer than Harper's but just as sure. "No, sir, we're serious. We know we're young, but we're not here to waste your time. We just want a chance." The innocence in her eyes didn't ask for pity. It demanded respect. Richard opened the folder, expecting crayon drawings or fantasy resumes, but what he saw made his heart pause. A cover page. Lily Morgan, Systems Innovator, age 10. Below it, a detailed write-up about a water purification system Lily had built using recycled parts. Diagrams, test results, and pictures from a small science conference filled the next pages. He flipped to Harper's folder. Harper James, software developer. Age 9. She had built a speech reading app that used facial recognition to help children on the autism spectrum communicate better. She had even won a regional tech award and been featured in a local paper. There were no parents listed, no advisors, just 2 addresses, a foster care center in Milwaukee and another in Kansas City. "Who helped you with this?" Richard asked, stunned. "No one," Harper said. "We did it ourselves. All we need is someone to believe we're more than just kids." Richard's hands trembled slightly as he closed the folders. Something inside him, buried under years of pressure and pride, shifted. He remembered being 10. He remembered trying to explain his dreams to adults who laughed or ignored him. But these girls, they were different. Not just brilliant, brave. "Come with me," he said finally. He turned toward the hallway, and the girls followed, their footsteps soft but sure. Mia leaned over to a nearby colleague and whispered, "I have a feeling we're about to witness something extraordinary." And indeed, something extraordinary had just walked into Silvertech Labs that strange Monday morning, something no resume, algorithm, or billionaire brain could have predicted. For a moment, Richard Grant said nothing. The office around him faded, the sound of typing in the background, the soft hum of the air vents, the occasional buzz of an elevator arriving down the hall. Everything fell away, as if the world had paused just long enough for him to try and understand what he was seeing. He looked again at the first resume. Harper James, software developer, age 9, Milwaukee, WI. He scanned it line by line, expecting to find childish exaggeration. But instead, every sentence made his heart beat faster. A built-first autonomous robot at age 7 using salvaged parts and a recycled phone motherboard. Developed Emo Voice, a speech-reading app to help nonverbal autistic children communicate more easily. App currently used by 3 hospitals in Wisconsin, developed independently with no adult programming assistance. She had even written, "Languages, Python, Java, C++, HTML, CSS. I'm currently learning Rust and Swift." He turned the page. It was filled with screenshots of her app's interface, charts showing how she had tested it with real children, and a letter from a local speech therapist. One line stood out. "Harper's app helped my 6-year-old son speak his first full sentence." Richard swallowed. He looked up briefly at the small girl sitting across from him. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. She wasn't smiling and she wasn't nervous. She was simply waiting for the world to catch up. Then he turned to the second folder. Lily Morgan, Systems Innovator, age 10, Kansas City, M.O. The first line punched him right in the gut. "Clean water isn't a privilege, it should be a right." Richard kept reading. Designed gravity-powered water purification system for rural and emergency zones. Tested with local creek water, passed lab testing for drinkable standards. Winner, National Young Inventor Award 2024. She had even written a short essay titled "My Dream to End Water Poverty," and it wasn't filled with fantasy. It was packed with real data, real prototypes, and real solutions. One photo showed Lily standing proudly next to her system, a tall column made of reused soda bottles, sand layers, and custom-built charcoal filters. In the background were children smiling, holding cups of water. There were even blueprints. Blueprints drawn by a 10-year-old girl with the precision of a college engineer. And then, there they were. Patent numbers. 2 of them, both pending. Richard felt something shift in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Wonder. He sat back in his chair, stunned. He had read thousands of resumes in his career, some from Silicon Valley PhDs, others from Ivy League prodigies. But never, not once, had a resume made him feel like he was the one behind. He looked back at Harper and Lily, 2 children in oversized business suits with steel in their eyes. His voice came out soft, hesitant, almost protective. "Who helped you write these?" Harper raised her eyebrows like it was a silly question. "No one. We watched videos online," she continued. "Then we read a few business books from the library. We figured we needed to sound grown up to even get in the door." "So we taught ourselves," Lily added. "We didn't have a choice." Richard's hands, still holding their resumes, trembled slightly. He couldn't tell if it was anger at the system that ignored them, or awe. These weren't children trying to play adult. These were minds that had outgrown the spaces they were allowed to exist in. "You've already done more at your age than most people do in their lifetime," Richard said slowly. "Why this internship? Why here?" Harper leaned forward. "Because no one takes us seriously." Lily added, "We're either too young, too small, or just Not expected to be more. And because we've both been told no so many times, Harper said, her voice firm but calm, that we stopped asking permission. Richard felt a lump rise in his throat. He tried to blink it away. There was something haunting in what she'd said. He had once been a 10-year-old genius, too, hungry for recognition, tired of being dismissed. But he had come from a family that could afford computers, tutors, opportunities. These girls, they had come from nothing, yet still dared to walk into his empire without flinching. A spark of protectiveness lit up in him. "You're not just here for an internship," he said finally. "You're here to wake people up." Harper smiled slightly for the first time. "Maybe." Lily looked down at the table and said softly, "We just need one person. Just one person to believe in us." Richard leaned back in his chair, the résumés still in his hands. But now they felt more like blueprints for the future than pieces of paper. The silence in the room was no longer awkward. It was sacred. Because in that moment, Richard Grant, a 30-year-old CEO, once a boy genius himself, was no longer the smartest person in the room. He was simply the first adult smart enough to listen. The decision didn't come easy. Richard Grant was a man of logic, efficiency, and risk assessments. Letting two children, no matter how brilliant, access the company's systems without full clearance was not standard protocol. But that morning, standing in front of their résumés, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. So, after speaking with his legal team, reviewing company liability policies, and checking the girls' references, what little there were, he made a quiet decision. "You've got 1 week," he told them. "A trial, no promises. But show me what you can really do." The girls didn't cheer or giggle. They simply nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Grant," Harper said with a quiet seriousness that didn't sound like a child at all. Day 1. Richard expected them to struggle a little, maybe spend a few hours clicking through screens, giggling at 3D models, asking how to use the keyboards. Instead, within 10 minutes of being shown the interface for Silvercore, the company's complex AI diagnostic platform, Harper had already flagged a long-standing memory leak that had been plaguing the QA team for months. She didn't just find it. She fixed it. With 3 lines of code, and when a junior engineer named Marco noticed, he nearly dropped his coffee. "Wait, you wrote this? You're 9. "Almost 10, Harper replied casually, not looking up. Lily, meanwhile, wasn't working with code. She had wandered to the systems lab where test models of Silvertech's robotics were stored. By lunchtime, she had improved a small medical drone's power efficiency by 14% by realigning its charging protocol. No one had asked her to, she just noticed. By the end of the second day, whispers spread through every department. "The kids? Yeah, they're not a joke. They're scary smart, like scary. I asked the little one for help with my bug, and she solved it in 5 minutes." Richard observed them quietly through the glass panels of his office. He didn't interfere. He watched. They never bragged, never interrupted, never demanded attention. They were gentle with their genius, which, to Richard, was the rarest form of brilliance. But by the 3rd day, something started to gnaw at him. They always ate lunch alone, tucked in the far corner of the cafeteria, their plastic containers always small and half-empty. No parents ever called. No guardians checked in. No one dropped them off or picked them up. When a delivery driver asked reception where to leave a package, he said, confused, "It's for 2 kids. But it's addressed to the company?" And then Richard saw it. Lily was rolling up her sleeve as she reached for a pen in the meeting room. A bruise, large, dark, and ugly, sprawled across her upper arm like a shadow trying to hide. His stomach twisted. Later that afternoon, when the girls were helping test an adaptive language module, he pulled Lily aside gently. They were in a quiet hallway, away from the others. He crouched down, lowering his voice. "Lily, can I ask you something?" She looked up, startled. Her wide brown eyes blinked. "What happened to your arm?" She flinched. Not much, but enough to break his heart. "Did someone hurt you?" Silence. She looked down at the floor tiles for a long time. Then, barely audible, she whispered, "We ran away from a bad foster home. They didn't care. They yelled a lot, sometimes worse." Richard felt his throat tighten. Every instinct in him wanted to scoop her up and take her somewhere safe. But Lily wasn't done. "But please don't feel sorry for us," she added, her voice steadier now. "That's not why we came." Harper appeared in the hallway behind them, sensing something was wrong. She walked over and placed a hand on Lily's shoulder protectively. "We're not here to talk about the past," Harper said. "We just want to earn our place. No shortcuts, no pity." There was a steel in her tone, a quiet strength. Richard nodded, heart pounding. He respected them even more now, not just for their minds, but for their resilience. Still, he couldn't ignore what he'd just learned. Later that evening, long after the girls had gone back to the room he had arranged at the nearby corporate apartment, Richard sat alone in his office. The lights of Chicago glittered outside the window, but he didn't see them. Instead, he stared at their resumes once again. Now each word, each accomplishment meant even more. These girls weren't just brilliant, they were survivors. He picked up the phone and called Mia. "I want to know everything about their background," he said. "Quietly, no reports, just find out what the system missed." Mia hesitated. "Richard, are you thinking of getting involved?" "I already am." The moment the story reached the boardroom, the storm began. Silvertech Labs' executive board met every second Thursday in a glossy, glass-paneled conference room high above downtown Chicago. It was the kind of place where every chair cost more than a month's rent, where coffee was served in porcelain, and where power didn't whisper, it thundered. This Thursday was different, because the subject wasn't quarterly profits or patent filings or merger strategy. It was two little girls, Harper James, Lily Morgan, names that had somehow made their way from the codebase logs to internal Slack channels, and finally into the crosshairs of the company's most powerful voices. "You let actual children into the server room?" barked Charles Redman, a former venture capitalist who now chaired the Tech Advisory Committee. "What if they triggered a breach? What if they tampered with proprietary code?" "This isn't some feel-good startup," muttered Margot Ellis, the head of legal. "It's a publicly traded company. We answer to shareholders." The room filled with murmurs of agreement. "It's a distraction," said another director, rolling a gold pen between his fingers. "And frankly, it looks bad in the press. Two unsupervised kids coding in our labs? People will ask questions we can't afford to answer." "This is a business," Charles added, "not a daycare center." Richard, standing at the far end of the long table, clenched his fists under the table. He had listened. Let them rant. Let them spew every outdated opinion their silk ties could hold. But now he stood up. Tall, calm, unapologetic. His voice rang out, clearer than any voice in the room. "You know what I think? I think we've forgotten what this company was built on." The room quieted. Silvertech was founded on the belief that genius can come from anywhere, from any zip code, from any background. I started this company in a garage when I was 18. Everyone called me reckless, too young, too ambitious. He looked around, locking eyes with each board member. "Those girls, Harper and Lily, they've done more in 10 years than most of us did by 30. They didn't come here for charity. They came here because they're brilliant, because they want to work, to learn, to build." He paused. "And if two genius children had to run away from an abusive foster home just to be taken seriously in a so-called progressive tech firm, maybe the problem isn't them." He tapped the table slowly. "Maybe the problem is us?" Silence. But not the good kind. The kind that tightens. The kind that builds behind closed doors. After the meeting, Richard left the room with his shoulders squared, but the air was heavy. Behind the polished doors, conversations resumed, but now in whispers. Margot leaned toward Charles. "We need to talk options. If Richard's starting to treat this company like a charity case, we could be looking at liability risks, PR disasters, even lawsuits. You saw the bruises on that girl? This isn't going to stay quiet." Charles nodded. "He's letting his emotions interfere. It's noble, sure, but reckless. What happens if the media gets wind of this runaway foster kid narrative?" "Exactly," Margot said, tapping her nails on the table. "Investors won't like it. Risk is unacceptable." "So what are you proposing?" another director whispered. Margot's eyes narrowed. We call for a vote. To remove him. If necessary. Charles sighed. He's too idealistic. That's the problem with boy geniuses. They forget how grown-ups play. The others nodded slowly. Not all of them agreed, but none of them spoke up. Because in boardrooms like this, silence is the first sign of betrayal. Meanwhile, in his office, Richard stared out the window. He knew the risk. He could feel the tides shifting beneath him. But he also knew something else. He had finally met two people who reminded him why he built this company in the first place. And he wasn't about to turn his back on them now, no matter the cost.